Opportunity was really staring the Detroit Lions in the face in the 2013 season. The Chicago Bears defense was god-awful. Cutler missed some games. You have Green Bay lose Aaron Rodgers for the majority of the second half of the season. You've got the Detroit Lions. They start off 6-3, and then with 4 weeks to go in the season, they're sitting at 7-5. And it looks like they're going to walk away with the division. There's no way they could possibly screw the pooch on this one. There's no way they could possibly piss this one down their leg. Well, except the Lions played like the Lions the last 4 weeks of the season. They basically, in my opinion, quit on their coach, quit on the season, lost their last 4 games, and finished 7-9 and missed the playoffs. Somehow, some way, the Lions managed to snag defeat out of the jaws of victory. So, of course, you had to figure there were going to be some big changes coming this offseason from the Detroit Lions. Jim Schwartz is gone, and that's probably a good thing because he was starting to really lose control of the team. This was a team that really, I talked about over the past couple of years, lacked discipline, not talent, but discipline and focus and steady, effective leadership. So the Lions went out and find a new head man in former Colts head coach Jim Caldwell, somebody who I think serves as very good counterculture to what Jim Schwartz was, a more fiery, intense type of guy. Caldwell is more of a calming, steady, disciplined type of force, and I think a very good addition to the Detroit Lions as their new head coach. They went out and signed Golden Tate in free agency from the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks because they knew that even with Megatron and with Matthew Stafford, they need more in that offense than what they had, especially in the passing game. They went and drafted the tight end out of UNC, Eric Ebron, in the first round. They drafted outside linebacker Kyle Van Noy from BYU in the second round. You know, this was a very important offseason for the Detroit Lions because they could really go one or two directions based off of 2012 and in particular 2013. They could improve and get themselves maybe into a position where they could think about being a playoff team in 2014, or they could take a huge step back and have to entertain the thought of potentially starting all over. Now, heading into 2014, some of the strengths I see for the Detroit Lions roster, I look at their running back duo of Jacques Bell and their starter Reggie Bush. That's a hell of a 1-2 combination. Here's a Reggie Bush that could do a lot of different things from the running back position, and ironically enough, you look at Jacques Bell, and yeah, he's more of a power guy, but man, he's a really good pass catcher out of the backfield too. And if one of those guys goes down, well, the other guy is still more than capable of putting up some big numbers, as we saw throughout the 2013 season. This is a definite area of strength for the Detroit Lions. They have the best 1-2 running back combination in the division. I think they also have the best defensive line in the NFC North. You're talking about with Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley and Ezekiel Ansah. You've got some guys that can put some pressure on the quarterback. You've got those marquee talents up front that could potentially take over football games and impose their will. And of course, when we're talking about the Detroit Lions, you talk about their best player, who I think everybody would agree would be Megatron, Calvin Johnson. When you have that type of weapon on the outside, when you have that type of player in your passing game, man, it opens up a lot of possibilities all over the place. In terms of question marks for this team heading into 2014, I think the secondary is obviously an issue. That's why a lot of people weren't that big on the Ebron drafting, because they said, well, is he going to play corner? Is he going to play safety? They have a lot of young pieces in the secondary. Are those young good pieces, or are those just young pieces? That's something I guess we'll find out in 2014, because the Lions really didn't do a lot to address that position. In fact, they cut Louis Delmas in the offseason, so we'll see what happens there. I also question their wide receiver and tight end groupings, even though they've added Golden Tate and even though they've added Eric Ebron and they re-signed Brandon Pettigrew. I still have concerns about whether or not this team is going to have enough weapons in the passing game, because you saw this over the past couple of seasons. If a team is able to take away Megatron, the Lions don't have a whole lot else going for them in the passing game, and their offense really comes to a screeching halt. So it is going to be critical for guys like Tate and Ebron to really come in and have an immediate impact for the Lions, take some of the pressure off of Matthew Stafford, in particular Calvin Johnson, in that Lions passing game. And I also have some question marks about Matthew Stafford. Here's a guy that, for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, could very well be that top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. The talent is there. There is no question about that. You see some of the numbers that this guy can put up, and they're sick, but he also has the tendency to lose his mechanics a little bit. He has a tendency to make some terrible decisions and really be reckless at the ball with the ball, at some critically important times. And I question whether Matthew Stafford in this offseason is going to make some of the changes necessary to help him ultimately reach his full potential, which I do think is as a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. Looking ahead to the Lions' 2014 schedule, just like the rest of the teams in the NFC North, they've got the AFC East and they've got the NFC South. They've also got thrown in there the New York Giants and the Arizona Cardinals. So not a brutal schedule for the Lions at all. In fact, I think the first half of the season sets up really, really nicely for the Lions to potentially, get off to a really hot start and really, put themselves in position at the halfway point of the season as a potential threat both in the wild card race and potentially in the division. You're talking about in their first 8 games, they host the Giants, they go to Carolina, host Green Bay, go to the Jets, host Buffalo, go to Minnesota, host New Orleans, go to Atlanta. You see the potential there for a 5-3, maybe even a 6-2 start. And if you're the Lions, again, you started off last year 6-3. If you could sit there and go 5-3 or 6-2 to start off the season, and you play with more focus and discipline and more of a steadying presence, you could be in the picture all year long. And I also like for the Lions the schedule setup of having 3 straight home games weeks 13 through 15. That's when you really need to start making some hay, and that's where you really need to start potentially making a move. And for the Lions to have 3 straight home games there at such a critical key part of the season, I think, again, the scheduling gods did the Lions some favors in 2014 with that kind of, I don't want to say soft, but less than incredibly difficult first half of the season, and then giving them 3 straight home games so late in the year. In terms of keys to success for this team, I think Ebron and Tate have to play well out of the gate immediately. They have to create some big plays in that Detroit Lions passing game. They've got to give Matthew Stafford more options and more help, and they've got to take pressure off of Calvin Johnson because, again, as great of a player as Calvin Johnson is, he's only one player. He cannot do it all himself. And when the Lions don't get that much out of a Calvin Johnson, if he's taken out of the game at all, the Lions as a team are entirely different, which is why I fully supported them taking Ebron in the first round because they needed a dynamic weapon to complement Calvin Johnson. His team must also learn how to limit its mistakes in key spots, learn how to better capitalize on situations. Over the past couple of seasons, I saw the Lions time after time after time get themselves into good positions, and then a fumble happens, or an interception happens, or a bad penalty happens, or a bad play call happens. All of these different things. The Lions have to play with more discipline, more focus, and more mental toughness, frankly. Their secondary needs to play better, and frankly, I think Matthew Stafford needs to do a better job of fixing some of his flaws and becoming the type of quarterback that I think he can be, and really stamp his dominance over the team, his place as the leader of the team, and be the guy that is the one that everybody can follow in those tough situations, because he shows flashes of being able to do that, but then he also shows those flashes of not so much. In terms of their season outlook for 2014, I think the Lions will make some improvements. They will make some strides. I think this is a team that will finish second in the NFC North. I love the Jim Caldwell hire for them. I think, again, a calming, steadying type of force, the antithesis of what Jim Schwartz was. And now you brought in some weapons in Golden Tate and Eric Ebron to that offense that desperately needed it. I like the drafting of Kyle Van Noy. Their linebacking core needed some punch, and now they've got another edge rusher and a nice all-around player. I'd expect them to win 9, maybe 10 games. I probably at this point will go 9-7, but I do think they're the second best team in the NFC North, and I think that will prove itself out throughout the course of the 2014 season.